Have you ever bought or planted a beautiful hanging basket that looked incredible at first, only to watch it slowly decline? Maybe it started out overflowing with color, spilling over the edges of the pot, the kind of basket that makes neighbors stop and ask where you got it. And then, somewhere along the way, it changed. The flowers thinned out, the leaves turned crispy at the edges. What was once the star of the porch started looking like something you should probably just throw away. Many gardeners assume the plant is finished. They assume they chose the wrong flowers, or that hanging baskets are simply not meant to last. But often, the real problem is hidden in the way the basket is being cared for, not in the plant itself. In this video, you are going to learn why hanging baskets fail, how to diagnose exactly what is going wrong with yours, how to bring a struggling basket back to life, and how to keep your blooms going strong for much longer than most people ever manage. Before we jump in, if you are someone who loves creating a beautiful garden but still struggles with those frustrating plant problems that nobody talks about, you are in the right place. This channel is about finding simple solutions, smarter plant choices, and practical gardening techniques that help everyday gardeners grow with confidence. Consider subscribing, turn on the notification button, and join our gardening community, because there is always another problem to solve and another garden idea to discover. So let's talk about what is really happening here. Many gardeners experience beautiful hanging baskets early in the season, only to watch them decline later. It feels almost personal, like the plant simply gave up on you. But the truth is far less dramatic and far more fixable. It is often hidden mistakes in watering, feeding, placement, and maintenance, small habits that quietly build up over time until the basket can no longer keep up. Here is the main idea I want you to hold on to for the rest of this video. A struggling hanging basket is not always a dead basket. With the right care, many plants can recover and continue producing beautiful blooms, sometimes even fuller and healthier than before. What is the biggest problem you have had with hanging baskets? Let us know in the comments, because your experience could help another gardener who is dealing with the exact same thing right now. By the end of this video, you will understand the 7 biggest reasons hanging baskets struggle, a complete step-by-step rescue plan, which plants naturally hold up better over time, and a simple weekly routine that keeps everything blooming without taking over your life. Let's start with something that surprises a lot of people. Why hanging baskets are different. Hanging basket care is different from everything else in your garden. Here is something most people never really think about. A hanging basket is not just a plant that happens to be up in the air instead of in the ground. It lives under completely different rules. Think about how much soil is packed into that basket. It might look full and generous, but compared to the open ground, it is a tiny volume of soil trying to support a huge amount of top growth. That soil has to hold moisture, nutrients, and support root systems, all in a fraction of the space a plant would normally have if it were growing in a border or a raised bed. Because there is so little soil, that soil heats up much faster than the ground does. On a hot afternoon, the sides of a hanging basket, especially plastic or dark-colored ones, can get significantly warmer than soil at ground level, which is naturally insulated by the earth around it. Warmer soil dries out faster, and warm roots are stressed roots. Add wind to the equation. Hanging baskets are usually positioned somewhere elevated, on a porch, under an eave, or hanging from a bracket, which means they catch more air movement than a plant tucked into a bed. That constant airflow pulls moisture out of the soil and off the leaves much faster than most gardeners expect. Then there is the nutrient problem. Every time you water a hanging basket, especially if you are watering generously, Nutrients get flushed right out through the drainage holes. In the ground, nutrients are replenished by organic matter, microbial activity, and a much larger reservoir of soil. In a basket, once the nutrients are gone, they are gone, and the plant has no backup system to draw from. Here is the sentence I want you to remember. Hanging baskets are not normal plants placed higher up. They are living containers with unique challenges, and once you understand that, everything else in this video is going to make a lot more sense. But this next mistake is one many experienced gardeners still make, even after years of growing hanging baskets. The 7 biggest reasons hanging baskets fail. Let's go through each one in detail, because understanding the why behind each mistake is what actually helps you fix it and prevent it from happening again. Mistake 1. They dry out faster than you think. This is probably the single most common reason hanging baskets decline, and it usually is not because the gardener is neglectful. It is because hanging baskets simply need more frequent attention than people expect. Remember what we just talked about: small soil volume, elevated position, more airflow, faster heat buildup. All of that adds up to a basket that can go from perfectly moist to bone dry in a single hot afternoon, sometimes even faster during a heat wave. Later in the growing season, as the plant grows larger and root systems become denser, the problem gets worse. A bigger plant needs more water, but it is drawing from the same small pot, so the margin for error keeps shrinking. Here are the signs to watch for. Wilting during the hottest part of the day is normal for some plants and often recovers by evening, but wilting that does not bounce back overnight is a warning sign. Crispy, brown leaf edges usually mean the plant has been drying out repeatedly, not just once. And flowers dropping before they even fully open is often a stress response to inconsistent moisture. Now here is where a lot of gardeners get tripped up: the difference between a quick splash of water and a proper soak. Quickly running water over the top of the soil for a few seconds might look like watering, but it often only wets the very top layer, while the roots underneath stay completely dry. A proper watering means adding water slowly enough that it actually has time to soak down through the entire root ball, and continuing until you see water coming out of the drainage holes at the bottom. That is your signal that moisture has reached the roots, not just the surface. During hot stretches, many hanging baskets genuinely need daily watering, and during extreme heat, some may even need water twice in a day. This is not a sign that something is wrong with your basket. It is simply the nature of container gardening in elevated, exposed conditions. The good news is, this problem can often be fixed almost immediately once you understand it. Which brings us to the next mistake, one that is closely related but often overlooked. Mistake 2. Water is running through without reaching the roots. This one confuses a lot of gardeners because from the outside, it looks like watering is happening correctly. Water goes in, water comes out the bottom, so surely the roots are getting moisture, right? Not always. Over time, potting soil that has been allowed to dry out completely can become hydrophobic, meaning it actually starts repelling water rather than absorbing it. Once soil reaches this state, water poured on top tends to run straight down the inside edge of the container and out the drainage holes, without ever properly soaking into the root ball in the center. This is why gardeners are often shocked to dig into a basket that they have been watering faithfully every day, only to find bone-dry soil just below the surface, right where the roots actually need the moisture. The fix here is a technique sometimes called deep soaking. Instead of a quick pour, place the entire basket in a larger container or sink filled with a few inches of water, and let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes. This allows water to be drawn up slowly from the bottom, rehydrating the soil evenly from the inside out. Once the surface of the soil feels moist to the touch, you know the water has actually reached where it needs to go. If soaking is not practical for your setup, another option is watering more slowly and repeatedly. Water a little, wait a few minutes for it to absorb, then water again. This gives the dried-out soil particles time to soften and start accepting moisture properly instead of shedding it straight through. Before you replace your basket, thinking the plant has simply died, check this first. Many baskets that appear to be finished are actually suffering from this exact issue: dry roots hiding underneath soil that looks like it has been getting watered all along. Mistake 3. They run out of nutrients. Here is a fact that surprises a lot of newer gardeners. Hanging basket plants, especially heavy flowering varieties like Petunias and Calibrachoa, are essentially working overtime. Producing that many blooms takes an enormous amount of energy, and that energy comes from nutrients in the soil. As we mentioned earlier, frequent watering, which hanging baskets absolutely need, also washes nutrients out of the soil faster than in a garden bed. So you end up with plants that need more food than average, growing in a container that loses nutrients faster than average. That combination is exactly why so many baskets look incredible for the first few weeks and then start to fade. Signs of nutrient depletion include pale or yellowish leaves, especially on older growth, noticeably weaker or slower new growth, and fewer flowers overall, even when the plant still looks reasonably healthy. Later in the growing season, many gardeners notice this fading and assume the plant is simply past its prime. In reality, it is often just hungry. Proper feeding for hanging baskets usually means a diluted liquid fertilizer applied on a regular schedule, often weekly, rather than a single slow-release application at planting time. Slow-release fertilizers can still be useful, but for heavy blooming baskets, supplementing with regular liquid feeding tends to produce noticeably better results over the full growing season. A bloom-boosting fertilizer, higher in phosphorus and potassium relative to nitrogen, is generally a good match for flowering baskets, since it supports flower production rather than just leafy growth. Mistake 4. Not deadheading enough. This one sounds small, but it has a bigger impact than most people realize. Spent flowers left on the plant are not just unattractive, they are actively using up energy that the plant could otherwise be putting into new blooms. When a flower fades and begins forming seed, the plant redirects resources toward that seed production. From the plant's perspective, its job is done. It has successfully flowered and is now trying to reproduce. Removing spent blooms before seed formation tricks the plant into continuing to flower because it has not yet accomplished its reproductive goal. For plants like Petunias, Calibrachoa, and verbena, deadheading regularly, even a few minutes a week, can significantly extend the blooming period and keep the display looking fuller and fresher. Some newer varieties are marketed as self-cleaning, meaning spent flowers drop off on their own without deadheading. This can reduce the workload, but even self-cleaning varieties often benefit from occasional grooming, especially later in the season when growth becomes denser. Mistake 5. The basket has become root-bound. As a hanging basket plant grows throughout the season, its root system keeps expanding to fill the available space. Eventually, in many baskets, roots become densely packed, circling the inside of the container with very little soil left between them. A root-bound basket dries out even faster than usual because there is less actual soil left to hold water and more root mass competing for whatever moisture is available. It also becomes harder for nutrients and water to move evenly through the container, since dense roots can create channels that water flows through quickly rather than spreading throughout the soil. Signs of a root-bound basket include the plant needing water noticeably more often than it used to, roots visible at the drainage holes or even at the surface of the soil, and an overall decline in vigor despite consistent watering and feeding. If you gently slide the plant out of its container and see a tightly wound mass of roots with very little visible soil, that basket is root-bound. The solution depends on how much of the season is left. Sometimes trimming back a portion of the root mass and refreshing the soil around it can revive a basket. In other cases, especially if a lot of the growing season remains, moving the plant into a larger container gives the roots room to expand again and can lead to a strong recovery. Mistake 6. The plant is in the wrong location. This mistake often goes unnoticed because the basket may look perfectly fine for the first several weeks, especially in spring when light conditions and temperatures are milder. As the season progresses and sun intensity or shade patterns shift, a basket that started in the right spot can end up somewhere that no longer suits it. Sun-loving plants like petunias, Calibrachoa, verbena, and ivy geranium generally need several hours of direct sunlight to produce their best blooms. Without enough light, they tend to stretch, produce fewer flowers, and look thin and leggy, even with perfect watering and feeding. Shade-loving plants like fuchsia, begonia, bacopa, and lobelia, on the other hand, often struggle in intense afternoon sun. Their leaves can scorch, moisture loss increases dramatically, and the plants may wilt repeatedly even when the soil is still moist, simply because they are not built to handle that much direct heat and light. Over time, hanging baskets can begin struggling simply because the sun's angle has changed, nearby trees have filled in with more leaves, or a structure now casts more shade than it did earlier in the season. It is worth periodically reassessing whether your basket's location still matches what the plant actually needs, rather than assuming the original placement will always be correct. Mistake 7. Gardeners are afraid to cut them back. This is probably the mistake that feels the most counterintuitive, and it is exactly why so many gardeners avoid it. When a hanging basket starts looking leggy, with long bare stems and flowers only at the very tips, the natural instinct is to leave it alone, because cutting away growth feels like it will only make things worse. In reality, leggy growth is often a sign that the plant has used up its energy pushing stems outward in search of light, or simply through natural growth patterns, and it no longer has the structure to support dense, compact flowering. Trimming back these overgrown stems, sometimes by a third or even close to half of their length, redirects the plant's energy toward producing fresh, bushy growth from lower on the stem. Yes, this means the basket will look less full for a week or two immediately after pruning. That temporary sacrifice is exactly what allows the plant to come back fuller and more floriferous than before, rather than continuing to stretch thin with fewer and fewer blooms over time. Many gardeners who finally try this rescue technique are surprised at how quickly the plant responds, often showing new growth within just a week or two, under good conditions. We have now covered all 7 of the biggest reasons hanging baskets struggle, but identifying the problem is only half the equation. Let's talk about exactly how to bring a struggling basket back to life. How to rescue a struggling hanging basket. Here is where everything comes together into a practical, step-by-step plan. If your basket is looking tired, thin, or discouraged right now, this is exactly what to do. Step 1. Remove dead flowers and damaged growth. Start by clearing away anything that is clearly finished, spent blooms, yellowed leaves, and any stems that are dried out or broken. This immediately improves airflow and stops the plant from wasting energy trying to support dead material. Step 2. Trim overgrown or leggy stems. As we discussed, Do not be afraid to cut back stems that have become long and bare. This encourages fresh, denser growth rather than continued thin stretching. Step 3. Deep soak the basket. Using the technique from earlier, thoroughly rehydrate the soil, either by soaking the container in water for 10 to 15 minutes or by watering slowly and repeatedly until moisture reaches all the way through the root ball. Step 4. Feed appropriately. Once the plant is properly hydrated, apply a diluted liquid fertilizer suited to flowering plants. Avoid feeding a severely dehydrated plant first, since fertilizer applied to dry roots can sometimes cause additional stress. Water first, then feed. Step 5. Check the sunlight situation. Take a moment to honestly assess whether the basket's current location still matches what the plant needs. If conditions have changed significantly, consider relocating the basket, even temporarily, to a spot with more appropriate light. Step 6. Remove severely damaged sections. If part of the basket is beyond recovery, a section that is completely dried out or diseased, it is often better to remove that portion entirely rather than let it drag down the rest of the plant. Step 7. Allow recovery time. This is the step most gardeners skip, and it might be the most important one. After a proper rescue, a struggling basket typically needs 1 to 2 weeks to show visible improvement. Resist the urge to judge success or failure too early, and continue consistent care during this recovery window. Here is the encouraging truth I want to leave you with in this section. Many baskets that look finished are actually just stressed, not dead. And stressed plants can often be brought back with the right combination of trimming, watering, feeding, and patience. Of course, results will always depend on the specific plant variety, your climate, recent weather conditions, the size of the container, and overall growing conditions, so not every basket will respond identically. But far more baskets are salvageable than most gardeners realize. Hanging basket plants that naturally perform better. Now that you know how to diagnose and rescue a struggling basket, let's talk about setting yourself up for success from the start by choosing plants that are naturally more forgiving and better suited to hanging basket conditions. For sunny locations, a few standout performers include Petunias, known for their vigorous trailing habit and continuous blooming with proper deadheading, and Calibrachoa, sometimes called million bells, which produces an enormous number of small blooms and tends to be relatively self-cleaning. Verbena offers excellent heat tolerance and a cascading growth habit that fills out a basket beautifully, while ivy geranium brings a slightly more structured, trailing look with strong sun tolerance. Bidens adds a cheerful, airy texture with small yellow blooms, and portulaca, sometimes called moss rose, is remarkably drought-tolerant, making it a forgiving option for gardeners who occasionally miss a watering. For shadier spots, fuchsia remains one of the most rewarding choices, with distinctive dangling blooms that thrive in filtered light and cooler conditions. Begonias offer reliable color with relatively low maintenance, while bacopa provides a soft, trailing texture with small white or lavender flowers that pair beautifully with bolder blooms. Lobelia brings vivid blue tones that are hard to achieve with other plants. Torrenia, sometimes called wishbone flower, tolerates part shade wonderfully with unique bicolor blooms, and impatiens remain a classic shade performer, valued for consistent, abundant flowering in lower light conditions. Choosing plants suited to your actual light conditions, rather than simply what looks appealing at the garden center, is one of the most effective ways to prevent many of the 7 mistakes we covered earlier before they even start. A simple weekly routine to keep baskets blooming. Let's bring everything together into a realistic, sustainable routine, because consistent small efforts matter far more than occasional big interventions. On hot days, especially during summer heat, check soil moisture daily. This does not need to take long. Simply pressing a finger into the top inch of soil tells you whether watering is needed that day. On a weekly basis, deadhead spent blooms. Inspect leaves for any signs of pest activity, disease, or nutrient deficiency, and apply diluted liquid fertilizer if the plant shows any signs of fading or if it has been more than a week since the last feeding. On a monthly basis, take a closer look at the overall shape of the basket and trim back any areas that are becoming leggy or unbalanced, and reevaluate whether the current location still provides appropriate light as the season progresses and surrounding conditions shift. This routine is intentionally simple. The goal is not perfection, it is consistency. A few minutes of attention spread across the week will do far more for your hanging baskets than an occasional intense rescue session, though as we covered earlier, rescue is absolutely still possible when a basket does fall behind. So let's bring this all together. Hanging baskets fail for very specific, very fixable reasons: faster drying due to limited soil volume, water that runs through without properly reaching the roots, nutrient depletion from frequent watering, insufficient deadheading, root-bound conditions, mismatched sunlight exposure, and hesitation to prune back leggy growth. None of these problems mean your basket or your gardening ability is a failure. They simply mean there was a hidden factor that most gardeners are never actually taught to look for. The next time you see a hanging basket that looks tired, dry, or past its best, remember this: a struggling hanging basket is not always a dead basket. With the right combination of deep watering, proper feeding, thoughtful placement, regular deadheading, and the occasional confident trim, many baskets can be brought back to fuller, healthier blooming than you might expect. If this video helped you understand your own hanging baskets a little better, consider subscribing for more practical gardening guidance like this. And I would genuinely love to hear from you. What is the one hanging basket mistake you have made in the past that you now know how to avoid? Share it in the comments, because your experience might be exactly what helps another gardener save their own basket this season. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.